Imagine a man born in a windowless log cabin with nothing but a borrowed book and a firelit floor to learn from. A man who lost his mother at 9, failed in business, lost his sweetheart to typhoid, and suffered defeat after defeat in politics. Now, imagine that same man standing amidst a nation tearing itself apart, holding the weight of 4 million enslaved souls on his shoulders. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a story of a ghost who haunted his own life until he became a legend. This is the Abraham Lincoln you never knew. The air in the Kentucky woods of 1809 didn't smell like destiny. It smelled of damp earth, wood smoke, and the harsh reality of survival. On February 12th, in a floorless cabin at Sinking Spring Farm, Nancy Hanks Lincoln gave birth to a boy. They named him Abraham, after his grandfather, who had been shot dead by Native Americans while working in a field. Death, it seemed, was the Lincoln family's first neighbor. Young Abe wasn't a child of privilege. He was a creature of the wilderness. By the age of 7, he was swinging an axe, clearing forests that seemed to have no end. But while his hands were calloused, his mind was restless. In a world where physical strength was the only currency, Abe craved words. He would walk 20 miles just to borrow a book. He read the Bible, Aesop's Fables, and Pilgrim's Progress by the flickering orange light of the fireplace, charcoal in hand, scratching math problems onto the back of a wooden shovel. Then came the first great shadow. When Abe was only 9, his mother Nancy died of milk sickness. He watched his father, Thomas, carve a wooden coffin from logs. The boy who would one day heal a nation had to first watch his own world crumble. Years later, the family moved to Illinois. Abe was now a giant of a man, 6 feet 4 inches tall, lanky, with arms that seemed too long for his body, and deep-set, melancholy eyes. He was a rail splitter, a flatboatman, and a storekeeper, but the river was calling. On a trip down the Mississippi to New Orleans, Lincoln saw something that changed him forever. He saw human beings in chains. He saw a young girl being poked and prodded like livestock on an auction block. Witnesses say he turned away, his face pale, and whispered, "If I ever get a chance to hit that thing, I'll hit it hard." Lincoln's rise wasn't a straight line. It was a zigzag of failures. He ran for the state legislature and lost. He opened a general store. It went bankrupt. He fell in love with Anne Rutledge, but she died young, leaving him in a depression so deep his friends feared he would take his own life. He often walked the woods alone, carrying a pocket knife to keep himself safe from his own thoughts. Yet the log cabin lawyer emerged. Self-taught, he became one of the most respected legal minds in Illinois. He wasn't polished. He wore a stovepipe hat that made him look like a tower, and he kept his legal papers inside it. He was known as Honest Abe, not because he was a saint, but because in a profession of liars, his integrity was a weapon. The 1850s brought the storm. America was a powder keg. The North was industrializing. The South was tied to the whip and the cotton field. When the Kansas-Nebraska Act threatened to spread slavery into new territories, the quiet lawyer felt a fire ignite in his bones. He joined the newly formed Republican Party. In 1858, he challenged the little giant, Stephen D. Douglas, for a Senate seat. It was during these debates that Lincoln uttered the words that would define the century. "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free." He lost that election, but the North was watching. They saw a man who spoke with the rhythm of a prophet and the logic of a mathematician.
In 1860, the impossible happened. The rail splitter from the frontier was elected the 16th President of the United States. But as the telegrams flashed the news across the nation, there were no celebrations in the South. To them, Lincoln was a revolutionary, a threat to their way of life. Before he even took the oath of office, 7 states had seceded. The Union was shattering like glass. Lincoln arrived in Washington, D.C. in the dead of night, disguised to avoid assassins. The Capitol was a swamp of tension. On April 12, 1861, the first shots fired at Fort Sumter signaled the start of the American Civil War. The early years of the war were a nightmare for Lincoln. He wasn't a military man, yet he had to manage incompetent generals who were too afraid to fight. He spent sleepless nights in the telegraph office, his eyes red-rimmed, waiting for news from battlefields like Bull Run and Antietam. The casualties were staggering, thousands of young men dying in the mud. The weight of every death seemed to etch a new wrinkle into Lincoln's face. In photos from 1861 to 1865, you can see him aging decades in just 4 years. But the pain wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. In 1862, his beloved 11-year-old son, Willie, died of typhoid fever in the White House. Lincoln was devastated. He would often lock himself in a room just to weep, saying, "My boy is gone, he is actually gone." Yet out of this darkness came his greatest resolve. He realized the war couldn't just be about territory, it had to be about the soul of humanity. On January 1, 1863, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. With the stroke of a pen, he turned the Union Army into an army of liberation. He knew this would make the South fight harder, but he told his cabinet, "If my name ever goes into history, it will be for this act." By 1863, the fields of Pennsylvania were soaked in blood. The Battle of Gettysburg had left 50,000 men dead or wounded. Lincoln was invited to say a few appropriate remarks at the dedication of the cemetery. The featured orator spoke for 2 hours. Then Lincoln stood up. He spoke for just over 2 minutes, only 272 words. He didn't focus on hatred or revenge. Instead, he spoke of a new birth of freedom. The crowd was silent, not because they weren't impressed, but because the words were so profound they felt like a prayer. The Gettysburg Address redefined what it meant to be an American. As the war neared its end in 1865, Lincoln's heart turned toward healing. While others wanted to punish the South, Lincoln's message was, "With malice toward none, with charity for all." On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered. The war was over. The Union was saved. For the first time in years, the burden lifted from Lincoln's shoulders. On the morning of April 14th, he told his wife Mary, "I never felt so happy in my life." That evening, they went to Ford's Theater to watch a play. As Lincoln sat on the balcony, laughing at a joke, a shadow crept up behind him. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and actor, fired a single lead ball into the back of the president's head. Lincoln never regained consciousness. He died the next morning. As he breathed his last, his Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, whispered the words that would echo through time. "Now he belongs to the ages." The train carrying Lincoln's body back to Illinois traveled through 180 cities. Millions of Americans stood by the tracks in silence, weeping for the man they called Father Abraham. Abraham Lincoln was a man of contradictions, a jokester who suffered from clinical depression, a man of peace who led a bloody war, and a commoner who became a king in the hearts of his people. He didn't just save the United States, he proved to the world that a government of the people could survive its darkest hour. Closing hook for video. Next time you look at a penny or a $5 bill, look closely at that face. Those deep lines weren't just from age, they were the scars of a nation being reborn. Abraham Lincoln died so that America could live, reminding us that even the humblest beginning can lead to a legacy that never ends. While the cannons roared in Virginia, a different kind of war was being waged inside the walls of the White House, a war of the spirit. Many people don't know that Abraham Lincoln was a man haunted by the supernatural. Perhaps it was the constant presence of death, or perhaps it was his lonely childhood, but Lincoln possessed a sixth sense that chilled around him. The mirror of the two faces. Shortly after his election in 1860, Lincoln was resting on a sofa when he looked into a swinging mirror across the room. He saw his reflection, but with a terrifying twist. There were two faces. One was his normal self, glowing with health, and the other was a ghostly pale version of himself, staring back with sunken eyes. He tried to show his wife Mary, but the phantom face vanished. Mary, a firm believer in the occult, turned pale. She interpreted it as a sign. He would be elected to 2 terms, but the ghostly face meant he would not survive the second. Lincoln couldn't shake the feeling that he was a walking dead man. Seances in the Red Room. The death of their son, Willie, drove the Lincolns into a world of shadows. Mary Todd Lincoln, consumed by grief, began inviting mediums and spiritualists to the White House. In the darkened Red Room, the President of the United States sat in circles, holding hands with strangers, hoping to hear a knock or a whisper from their dead son. While Lincoln remained a skeptic, he attended these seances to comfort his wife, often sitting in the corner with a sad, knowing smile. He once joked that the spirits gave him better advice than his own cabinet, but the darkness of those rooms stayed with him. The dream of the funeral. Just 10 days before he was killed, Lincoln had a dream that was so vivid he couldn't stop talking about it. He told his friend Ward Hill Lamon that in the dream he heard the sound of hundreds of people sobbing. He walked through the White House, room after room, but saw no one. Finally, he entered the East Room. There he saw a funeral die guarded by soldiers. A corpse lay there, its face covered. "Who is dead in the White House?" Lincoln asked a soldier in the dream. The soldier replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." To understand why the American people loved him, you have to look at the Midnight President. Lincoln suffered from chronic insomnia. When he couldn't sleep, he would wander the halls of the White House in his nightshirt, or better yet, he would walk alone, without guards, to the War Department telegraph office. Imagine a soldier on guard duty at 2 a.m., seeing the tall, lanky figure of the president walking through the fog of Washington, his head down, hands behind him. Lincoln would often stop and talk to the common soldiers. He didn't talk like a politician, he talked like a father. He would ask about their mothers, their farms, and their fear of the coming battle. The old Abe humor. Despite the crushing weight of the war, Lincoln was the storyteller-in-chief. He used humor as a survival mechanism. He once said, "If I did not laugh, I should die." He told dirty jokes, frontier stories, and self-deprecating tales. Once, a man accused him of being two-faced. Lincoln looked at the man and calmly said, "If I had another face, do you think I'd be wearing this one?" But behind the laughter was a man who suffered from the hypo, what we now call clinical depression. There were days he couldn't get out of bed, paralyzed by the sheer amount of blood being spilled in his name. He felt every bullet that hit a soldier was a bullet meant for him.
The air in Washington during the spring of 1865 was thick with a strange mixture of triumph and dread. The city was illuminated with torches to celebrate the surrender of the Confederate Army at Appomattox. But while the North cheered, a dark conspiracy was breathing in the boarding houses of the capital. John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor with the face of a fallen angel and a heart full of bitterness, was not celebrating. He was a man who believed he was a hero in a tragedy that had gone wrong. He didn't just want Lincoln dead, he wanted the entire Union government decapitated. On the morning of April 14th, Good Friday, Lincoln sat down for breakfast. For the first time in 4 years, the deep hollows under his eyes seemed less dark. He told his son, Robert, about a dream he had the night before. He was on a phantom ship, moving rapidly toward a dark and indefinite shore. He had seen this ship before every major Union victory: Gettysburg, Antietam, Vicksburg. To Lincoln, the ship meant the war was finally, truly over. He did not realize the dark shore was his own grave. That afternoon, Lincoln took a carriage ride with his wife, Mary. He talked about the future. He wanted to travel to the Holy Land, to walk the streets of Jerusalem. He was a man finally stepping out of a long, cold shadow. But as he spoke of peace, Booth was at Ford's Theater, boring a small hole into the door of the presidential box. He was preparing the stage for the most horrific performance of his life. The play was a comedy called Our American Cousin. Lincoln arrived late, and the orchestra played Hail to the Chief as the audience of 1,700 stood to cheer their savior. Lincoln sat in a red silk rocking chair, draped in an American flag. Beside him sat Mary and 2 young guests. The president's bodyguard, a man named John Parker, who had a history of drinking on duty, left his post to grab a beer at the saloon next door. The door to the box was left unguarded. At 10:15 p.m. during the third act, the theater erupted in laughter at a specific joke. Booth knew the play by heart. He knew this was the loudest moment. He stepped into the box, drew a single-shot .44 caliber Derringer, and held it to the back of Lincoln's head. The report of the pistol was muffled by the laughter. Lincoln didn't scream. He didn't even fall. His head simply slumped forward as the smoke filled the box. Booth stabbed the guest, Major Rathbone, in the arm and leaped from the balcony to the stage, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. He broke his leg upon landing, but in the confusion he vanished into the night on a waiting horse. Inside the box, a young doctor named Charles Lale fought through the crowd. He found the president paralyzed, his eyes closed, his breathing labored. When he felt the back of his head, he found a hole no larger than a finger. He looked at the people around him and shook his head. The wound was mortal. They carried the massive, broken body across the street to a boarding house owned by William Peterson. Because he was so tall, they had to lay him diagonally across a bed that was too small for him. All night long, the giants of the government gathered in that cramped, candlelit room. They watched the man who had held the Union together struggle for every breath. Outside, a cold rain began to fall on Washington. At 7:22 a.m. the next morning, the breathing stopped. The heart that had felt the weight of every dead soldier finally rested. Mary Todd Lincoln's screams filled the house, but the room itself was deathly silent. It was then that Stanton uttered his famous line, marking the transition of a man into a myth. But the story did not end with his death. The manhunt for John Wilkes Booth would become the largest in history. For 12 days, the assassin was hunted through the swamps of Maryland and the woods of Virginia like a wounded animal. He was eventually cornered in a tobacco barn. When he refused to surrender, the soldiers set the barn on fire.
Through the cracks in the wood, a soldier named Boston Corbett saw Booth raising his rifle and fired. Booth was dragged out, paralyzed. His last words, as he looked at his own hands, were, "Useless, useless." As Booth died in disgrace, Lincoln's body was being prepared for a journey like no other. A black-draped funeral train, the Lincoln Special, began a 1,600-mile journey back to Springfield, Illinois. In every town, in every field, people stood by the tracks. Farmers stopped their plows. Mothers held up their children to see the black engine pass. It is said that even the birds stopped singing. He was the first American president to be assassinated, and the grief was so thick it felt like a physical weight on the continent. Abraham Lincoln went into the earth, but he never stayed there. He became the ghost that haunts the halls of the Capitol, the giant in the marble chair at the memorial, and the voice that whispers whenever the house feels divided again. He was the man who proved that a person born in the dirt could reach for the stars, and in doing so, pull an entire nation up with him.
Today, when you walk the streets of Washington, D.C., you cannot escape him. The Lincoln Memorial is not just a building, it is a temple. The statue of Lincoln sits there, 19 feet tall, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. One hand is clenched in a fist, symbolizing his strength and determination to win the war. The other is open, symbolizing his compassion and his desire to bring the South back into the fold without vengeance. There is a legend that during times of great national crisis, the ghost of Abraham Lincoln is seen walking the halls of the White House. From Grace Coolidge to Winston Churchill, many have claimed to see the tall, thin silhouette of a man looking out the windows toward the old battlefields of Virginia. But his true ghost is in the laws of the land. It is in the 13th Amendment that ended slavery forever. It is in the idea that a boy with no shoes and no education can, through sheer grit and honesty, become the leader of the free world. Lincoln's life was a masterclass in the power of wait. He waited for the right moment to speak, the right moment to fight, and the right moment to forgive. He was a man of the frontier who became a man of the ages. He was Old Abe, the rail splitter, and the great emancipator. But above all, he was the man who refused to let the American experiment die. In the end, John Wilkes Booth thought he was killing a man, but he only succeeded in creating a martyr whose voice would grow louder with every passing century. As long as there is a struggle for freedom and a house that feels divided, the spirit of the 16th president will be there, reminding us that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.
Beyond the battlefields and the politics, Abraham Lincoln was a man of deep, hidden intellectual layers. To understand his success, one must look at his secret arsenal, the mental tools he used to outsmart his rivals. For a modern audience, this is the most fascinating part of his story, how a man with less than 1 year of formal schooling became a master of the English language. Lincoln was obsessed with Euclidean geometry.
Even while he was a traveling lawyer, he carried a copy of Euclid's Elements in his saddlebag. He didn't study it for math, he studied it for logic. He wanted to learn how to prove a point beyond a shadow of a doubt. This mathematical precision is what made his speeches so lethal to his opponents. He didn't just argue, he constructed proofs that slavery was logically and morally unsustainable. But he was also a master of the hidden note. Whenever Lincoln was furious with a general or a cabinet member, he would sit down and write what he called a hot letter. He would pour all his rage, insults, and disappointment into the ink. He would scream on paper, and then he would fold the letter, put it in his desk drawer, and never mail it. He knew that anger was a bad navigator. Only after his death did historians find these unsent letters, revealing a man who struggled with a volcanic temper but mastered it with iron discipline. As the war drew to a close, Lincoln's connection to the other side seemed to intensify. It wasn't just the dream of his own funeral, it was a series of bizarre coincidences that suggested he knew his time was short. On his final day, he told his bodyguard, William H. Crook, that he had been having dreams of being assassinated for 3 nights in a row. Crook begged him not to go to the theater. Lincoln replied, "I have promised my wife to go. I must go." Curiously, for years, Lincoln's standard goodbye to his guards was "good night." But on that fateful night, as he stepped into the carriage for Ford's Theater, he paused, looked at Crook, and said, "Goodbye." It was the only time he had ever changed his phrasing. Even more chilling is the story of the photograph. Just months before his death, Lincoln sat for a portrait. During the exposure, a strange crack appeared in the glass plate of the camera, right across Lincoln's forehead. The photographer was horrified and threw the plate away, but the image survived, a haunting premonition of the bullet that would strike him in almost the exact same spot. When you look at the United States today, you are looking at a map drawn by Lincoln's courage. He wasn't just a man who ended a war, he was the man who defined the American dream. He broke the cycle of hereditary power. He showed that brilliance doesn't require a Harvard degree and that leadership doesn't require a silver spoon. His death created a vacuum that the country struggled to fill for 100 years. The Reconstruction of the South was a failure, largely because the man with the charity for all was no longer there to lead it. Yet his words remained. During the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial under the shadow of the great emancipator to deliver his "I Have a Dream" speech. It was as if the 2 greatest voices in American history were shaking hands across a century. The rail splitter is gone. The lawyer is silent. The president is at rest. But the Union, the one he bled for, remains. As the clock struck 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865, the room in the Peterson house became a sanctuary of silence. But what happened next is a chapter of history that feels like a dark medical thriller. Before Lincoln's body could be sent back to Illinois, the government ordered a secret autopsy performed on a guest room table in the White House. The surgeons removed the president's brain to track the path of the bullet. As they placed the brain on a scale, a heavy silence fell over the room. They found that Lincoln's brain was surprisingly light, but the lead ball from Booth's pistol had traveled through the left hemisphere, lodging behind his right eye. During the procedure, a lock of his hair, matted with blood, was cut off and given to Mary Todd Lincoln's cousin. Today, that lock of hair remains one of the most expensive and haunting artifacts of the American presidency. But the physical journey was just beginning. Because the funeral train would take nearly 2 weeks to reach Springfield, the government hired embalmers, a new profession at the time. They used experimental chemicals to keep Lincoln's face looking lifelike. As the train stopped in city after city, the air grew heavy with the smell of roses and perfume used to mask the scent of decay. By the time he reached his hometown, his skin had turned a dark bronze color, making him look more like a statue than a man. It was as if he was turning into a monument before he even hit the ground. One of the greatest mysteries following Lincoln's death was the Lincoln Papers. For decades, a mysterious chest of his private letters and telegrams remained locked away. His son, Robert Todd Lincoln, guarded them with a ferocity that bordered on paranoia. He refused to let historians see them, leading many to believe they contained secrets about the war, or perhaps proof of traitors within the Union government. It wasn't until 1947, nearly a century after the war, that the papers were finally opened to the public. While they didn't reveal a grand conspiracy, they revealed something more human. Hundreds of letters from ordinary citizens, widows begging for help, soldiers asking for a second chance after desertion, and mothers thanking him for their sons' lives. Lincoln had saved almost every scrap of paper. He was a man who listened to the heartbeat of his people, one letter at a time. For the U.S. audience, no story of Lincoln is complete with the Lincoln-Kennedy connection. While many historians call it mere coincidence, the list of parallels is so long it feels like a glitch in the universe. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1946, Kennedy in 1946. Lincoln was elected president in 1960, Kennedy in 1960. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both were assassinated on a Friday in the presence of their wives. Both were shot from behind and in the head. Lincoln's successor was Andrew Johnson, born 1808. Kennedy's successor was Lyndon Johnson, born 1908. Both assassins, John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald, were known by their three names, and both were killed before they could stand trial. This twin history has become a staple of American folklore, fueling the idea that Lincoln wasn't just a man, but a recurring figure in the American soul. The story of Abraham Lincoln is not a story of a hero who lived happily ever after. It is a story of a man who took the sins of a nation upon himself and paid for them with his life. He was the scapegoat of the Republic. If you visit Springfield, Illinois today, you can stand at his tomb, but his real presence isn't in the bronze or the concrete. It's in the fact that the United States exists as one nation. It's in the fact that no human being can legally be owned by another in the Western world. He was a man of the woods, a man of the law, a man of the war, and finally, a man of the stars. Abraham Lincoln's life reminds us that the darkest nights produce the brightest leaders. As the lights go down on this story, remember his favorite poem, which he often recited when he was sad. Oh, why should the spirit of mortal be proud? The answer, perhaps, is that while our bodies are mortal, the freedom we build for others is eternal.